11 minutes after my mother's funeral service ended, my sister put an old key in my hand and said, "Claire, we need to open Dad's safe tonight." I looked at her. "Tonight?" "Yes. Now." There was no grief in her voice, not the kind you'd expect after losing your mother. There was urgency, like she was about to miss an appointment. If you listen to family stories where the real betrayal comes out piece by piece, stay with this one. Because that night, I thought I was about to uncover an old financial secret my father had left behind. I had no idea I was about to open up a 22-year-old family story. We were standing in a small reception room behind a funeral home in Columbus, Ohio. Outside, the November air was cold. Inside, there was coffee, lilies, and the low murmur people use after someone dies, as if speaking too loudly might make the loss more real. Mom's picture was on a table at the front, Linda Bennett, my mother. And I still hadn't fully accepted that I would never call her again just to ask if she'd made it home. My older sister Rebecca, who everyone called Becca, looked down at the key in my palm. "Mom said there were some papers in Dad's safe," she said. "We need to get them out." "What papers?" "I don't know." I looked at her. Becca looked away. It was a small thing, but it was the first thing that made me uneasy. I'm a commercial insurance claims adjuster. At work, people give me their version of what happened, and I compare dates, statements, receipts, and records to see where the pieces don't line up. I didn't do that with my family. At least, I tried not to. My role in the family had always been simple. If Becca and Daniel argued, I stepped in. If Mom was upset about something, I talked her through it. If there was a bill or some practical problem, I handled it. I was the daughter everyone said would understand. Maybe that was exactly why Becca chose me that night. She lowered her voice. "Dad's old study. The safe is in there. You should know the combination." Me. "Yeah, it was your birthday numbers." I shook my head. "No, Dad never used my birthday." Becca paused. "Maybe Mom told me wrong." She said it so quickly that I stopped. "You said Mom told you about the safe." "She did." "Then what's the combination?" Becca gave me 4 numbers. I didn't repeat them. I just looked at her. Because I knew they were wrong. I looked toward Mom's framed photograph, then back at Becca. "You sure?" "Claire, don't get hung up on this right now, just try it." For the first time, I realized her urgency wasn't about taking care of Mom's things. She needed that safe opened, and for some reason, she needed me to be the one to open it. At the time, I had no idea there was something inside that safe Becca had spent 22 years trying to forget. I just put the key in my pocket and followed her toward Dad's old study. Dad's study had always felt separate from the rest of the house. Wooden shelves, old files, a heavy oak desk, and the brown leather chair by the window where he used to read the Sunday paper. It was the first time I'd stood alone in that room since Mom died. Becca stood behind me. I entered the combination she gave me. First number, second, third, fourth. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. Behind me, Becca immediately said, "Dad must have changed it." I turned around. "How do you know that?" "What?" "That he changed it." She was quiet for a few seconds. "Claire? Seriously? We're arguing about this on the day of Mom's funeral?" That was Becca's strength. She could answer a question by making you feel like asking it was the problem. I said nothing. I opened another desk drawer. Inside were old papers, pens, and a stack of business cards. At the very bottom, I found Dad's small black notebook. On the last page were 4 numbers. I read them and entered them into the safe. Click. The lock opened. Becca leaned over my shoulder. The safe wasn't very big. Inside were several folders, 2 sealed envelopes, an old cashier's check, and a small brass key attached to a faded luggage tag. I picked up the key. There was a number written faintly on the back of the tag in pencil. Becca immediately said, "Leave that." I looked at her. "Why?" "It's old junk." "You didn't even look at it." "I know Dad's stuff." She reached for the key. I closed my hand around it. "I'm keeping it." Becca said nothing. I pulled out the other items. One folder had a date on it. 22 years old. That date stopped me. I remembered that year. A few months before Dad died, there had been a lot of tension in our family. I'd always been told that Dad had failed to follow through on a major financial commitment, and that his decision had caused everything to start falling apart. I was only 14 then. I didn't remember the numbers, but I remembered the year. I picked up the cashier's check. The amount was $42,000. When I saw the name of the recipient, my fingers stopped. I looked at Becca. "Who is this for?" Without looking at it, she said, "I don't know." I held the check toward her. "You just said you know Dad's stuff." "Claire, I said it was old paperwork. I don't remember every check." Her voice had gotten sharper. I put the check back in the folder. Then I looked at the brass key again. I saved the number from the luggage tag in my phone. Becca noticed. "What are you doing?" "Nothing." She didn't answer, but before I left the house she asked me one thing. "Do you still have Dad's old luggage?" I looked at her. "Yeah, why?" "Just wondering." At the time, I didn't think much of the question, but the next day, when I opened Dad's old suitcase, one thing immediately stood out. The luggage tag was gone. I kept thinking about that one question Becca had asked me. "Do you still have Dad's old luggage?" I called her. She answered this time. "What?" "You said Dad wanted to tell me what happened back then." "He did. But he didn't. Because Mom stopped him." "Why?" "Because by then it was too late." I walked over to the kitchen window. "Too late for what?" Becca lowered her voice. "Money." I closed my eyes. It was the answer I expected, but hearing it still didn't make anything clearer. "How much?" $42,000. I immediately looked at the cashier's check still sitting on my desk. "Franklin Pierce Holdings?" She went quiet. "Becca?" "Yes." For the first time, there was less defensiveness in her voice. "Dad sent that company a payment. But that payment happened because of me." I stared at the check. "You took the money?" "No." "Then what?" "I transferred it." She explained that 22 years earlier, the family business had been under serious cash flow pressure. Several invoices were late, and a supplier needed to be paid immediately. Becca was only 21, but she helped Dad manage the business accounts. She moved $42,000 out of the family account temporarily. She thought the money would be back within a few days. It wasn't. "I thought I could fix it," she said. Then another problem came up. Then another. "You lied to Dad?" "At first, I only told him the transfer was temporary." "And then?" "Then I started changing the paperwork." "I didn't say anything." She continued. "I wasn't stealing from some stranger, Claire. I thought I was saving the family." That was the part that bothered me most. She didn't see herself as a criminal. She saw herself as a 21-year-old who had tried to solve a crisis, made one bad decision, and then made another mistake trying to get out of the first one. When did Dad find out? A few months later. What did he do? He went through the records. And then? He confronted me? I asked. He didn't call the police? No? Why? Her voice got quieter. Mom was in really bad shape then. The business could have collapsed. We could have lost the house. Daniel was little. Dad said he'd handle it. But he didn't. He did. I immediately asked, how? She went silent. Then she said, he created a private paper trail. I think he wanted to make sure that if this ever came out, you wouldn't be blamed. I caught on that sentence. Why would I be blamed? Becca didn't answer. That silence bothered me more than anything she'd said. What were you looking for in the safe? An agreement? What agreement? The one that proves Dad gave me a chance to repay the money. And if I found it? Then maybe you'd understand what I did. And if I understood? Her voice was completely flat. Then you'd never forgive me. I lowered the phone. Before she hung up, Becca said one more thing. Claire, Mom didn't tell you because she knew you'd try to fix everything. That stopped me, because maybe for the first time, someone had named my oldest weakness. I always tried to fix things. And maybe Becca had always known that was the easiest way to get me to do what she wanted. That night, I closed Dad's files. For the first time, I wondered if Becca was right. Maybe I should stop. I put 3 things on the table in front of me: the cashier's check, Dad's handwritten note, and the folded page from Mom saying that Martin believed Claire needed to know the truth. Looking at those 3 things, I couldn't decide what I was supposed to protect. The truth? Or the family that had somehow survived 22 years without it? The next morning, Becca came to my house. She had a folder in her hand. She sat at the kitchen counter and slid it toward me. I want us to end this here. I didn't open it. How? Claire. Daniel wants the same thing. As soon as she said his name, I'll settle the remaining amount. Whatever financial liability is left, I'll handle it. You keep Dad's papers. I won't ask you for anything. And in exchange? You stop digging. I looked at her. Mom wanted me not to know? Mom wanted the family to stay together. That's not an answer. Becca rested her hand on the counter. My phone buzzed. Daniel. Please. Stop. I called him. He answered. You're with Becca? Yeah. Why? Because I don't think we should start an old family fight right after Mom's death. This isn't a fight. Maybe not to you, but it is to us. I said nothing. Then he added, if Becca can fix the money, let her. Do you really think this is just about money? He didn't answer. The call ended. I stood alone in my kitchen. I was facing the same choice I'd spent years avoiding. If I walked away, I might still have some kind of relationship with Daniel and Becca. If I kept going, our family might never be the same. I looked at Becca. Give me some time. She stood. At the door, she stopped. Claire, Dad did what he did to protect you. If you keep doing this, you're proving him wrong. Then she left. After she was gone, I opened my laptop. I didn't make a new conclusion. I just looked at the timeline. And that's when I noticed something. I still had the archived access records from the storage facility. Martin's last recorded visit was followed by no other names, at least not in the older records. I called Karen. Is Unit 214 still active? No, she said, but the access system has been replaced. Do you have any recent entries? Some digital records. I didn't tell her what I was looking for. I just asked whether an authorized person accessing an old unit would still generate an entry. Karen said, yes. Date, time, credential number. Everything. I hung up. I found nothing for the rest of the afternoon. Then, at 8:17 that night, Karen's email came in. The subject line read, Unit 214, recent access record. I opened it. There was a new entry. Today's date. 6:42 p.m. The credential number was an old one, and when I saw the name attached to it, I moved my hand away from the laptop. Rebecca Bennett. She had told me she barely remembered the storage unit existed. Yet she had been there that same day. And this time, there was no 22-year-old paper trail behind her. There was a digital record. I took a screenshot and saved it to my personal drive. Then I stored the original email in a separate folder. There's something you learn very quickly working insurance claims. If a piece of evidence might matter later, you don't leave it sitting only on your phone. You make a copy. You preserve the original. And most importantly, you build the timeline before you build the conclusion. That's what I did. On one side was Dad's cashier's check. On the other were the storage records. Then the insurance document. Then Mom's handwritten note. I wrote down every date. The $42,000 transfer in 2004. Martin's visits to the storage unit. The note saying I wasn't to be blamed. Mom's note from 2005. And now, 22 years later, Becca's access to Unit 214. I called Michael Reyes, whose name I found in one of the estate documents. I didn't tell him the family drama. I gave him the facts. He asked, "Do you have the original documents?" "Some of them." "Digital records?" "Yes." "Have you altered anything?" "No." "Good. Don't edit anything. Preserve the original files." I asked. "What if my sister says she only accessed the unit to pick up personal belongings?" Then her explanation gets compared with the evidence. Don't reach a conclusion yet. It was the same advice I gave people in my own work. But when it's your family, following your own rules is harder. I didn't tell Daniel yet. Then Becca texted me. "Did you decide?" I wrote back, "Almost." She replied, "Claire, please trust me." I turned off the screen. Trust. That was what this whole thing came down to. I had trusted her because she was my sister. I had trusted Mom because she was my mother. I had trusted Dad because he had always told me to trust the documents. Now I had 3 separate versions of the truth, but I still didn't have the whole picture. The next day, I laid all the records out on Michael's conference table. He looked through them one by one. The cashier's check, the insurance documentation, the storage logs, the recent access record. Then he picked up Mom's handwritten note. He was quiet for a while. "Claire," he said, "this note may be the most important piece here." "Why?" "Because it shows that at some point your mother knew what Martin was concerned about." I asked, "Does that prove Becca was responsible?" He shook his head. "Not by itself." Then he picked up the recent access record. "But it answers a different question." "What question?" "If Rebecca supposedly had no idea about the unit, why did she access it using a 22-year-old credential?" I didn't have an answer. That evening, Daniel came to my house. He walked straight into the kitchen and said, without sitting down, "Becca says you're going to destroy everyone." I looked at him. "I'm not destroying anyone." "Then what are you doing?" I put the documents on the table, one at a time. He said nothing. Finally, I placed Mom's note in front of him. Daniel read it. His expression changed. "Mom knew?" I nodded. He sat down. I said quietly, "Now I have to decide whether we save the family or tell the truth. If you were in Claire's position, what would you do? If telling the truth meant losing whatever trust your family had left, would you still put the evidence on the table?" I made my decision that night. But before I could face Becca, I needed one more document. That document would tell me who Dad had really been trying to protect. The next morning, Michael Reyes called me at 9:12. "Claire, the archived estate file came in." When I got to his office, a scanned document was open on the conference table. Dad's name was at the top. Mom's signature was at the bottom. The date was March 21st, 2005. 3 days after Mom had written that Dad wanted me to know the truth. It wasn't a confession. It was an acknowledgement. Linda had confirmed that she knew about the unauthorized transfer, Becca's involvement, and the repayment arrangement Martin had created. Mom knew, and later, she chose to stay silent. That afternoon, Becca and Daniel came to Michael's office too. Becca put a settlement agreement in front of me. "Sign it," she said. "I'll handle the rest of the liability." I didn't pick up the pen. Instead, Michael placed my timeline on the table. I put the cashier's check in front of them. $42,000, Franklin Pierce Holdings. Then Dad's insurance record. Then the old access log for Unit 214. Then the brass hotel key. Becca looked at the key and immediately looked away. I placed Dad's note in front of her. Do not let them tell Claire this was her fault. Daniel looked at me. Why would Claire be blamed? Becca pressed her lips together. For the first time, I explained the part Dad's records had made clear. Our family had allowed me to believe that Dad had backed out of a financial commitment he'd made for my future, and that his decision had helped create the crisis. The truth was that the money had already been redirected because of Becca's unauthorized transfer. Dad hadn't abandoned a promise to me. He had spent the time afterward trying to contain the damage. Becca said, I tried to pay the money back. I know. She seemed to expect an accusation. I didn't give her one. I simply placed the next page on the table. 6:42 p.m., her recent access to the storage unit. You told me you didn't remember Unit 214. Becca stared at the record. I went there to pick up some of Mom's things. Michael asked calmly, Then how did you access it using a 22-year-old credential? Becca started to answer, then stopped. Nobody in that room needed a confession. The record had already established the contradiction she'd been denying. Then I pulled out the final document. Mom's acknowledgement. Becca read the first line. Her fingers lifted from the paper. She signed this? Yes. She never told me. For the first time, Becca didn't look like the manipulative older sister I knew. She looked like a daughter who had spent 22 years convincing herself that she had protected her mother. But Mom had made a choice too. And all of us had paid a different price for it. Now you're facing the same question I was facing at that table. Is burying the truth to protect your family really loyalty, or is it just making the same mistake all over again? I slid the settlement agreement back toward her. I'm not signing it. Becca looked at me. So that's it? We're done? I didn't answer right away. I don't know. But I'm not helping you hide this again. That was my revenge. If you could even call it revenge. There was no shouting. No public humiliation. I simply stopped doing what my family had always expected me to do. Carry everyone else's consequences. The financial records went through a formal review. Becca had to address the remaining liability. The rest of the estate was handled under independent oversight. I didn't get some huge inheritance. Daniel and I were distant for a few months, but eventually, he stopped trying to mediate between Becca and me. Becca and I still aren't what we used to be. Maybe we never will be. Months later, I went back to the storage facility one last time. Unit 214 had already been cleared. I didn't go inside. I stood in the parking lot with the brass key resting in my palm. For 22 years, I had believed loyalty in our family meant not asking difficult questions. Now that key meant something else to me. Closed doors don't always protect privacy. Sometimes they only keep out the person who has the most right to know what's behind them. I took the key home and put it in a small wooden box. Dad never left me a perfect explanation. He only made sure that if I ever started asking questions, the records could eventually lead me somewhere the family story couldn't, to the truth. And if your family has ever treated loyalty and silence like they were the same thing, what do you think? Should some truths be buried to protect a family, or does everyone have the right to know the truth? In the next drama story, we'll step inside another family where what you see on the surface is nothing like what's really happening underneath.